Krieg Eterna is a game of strategizing and bluffing your way to victory across a series of battles. In this video, let's learn how to play Krieg Eterna. First, let's start with a quick overview. Each game of Krieg Eterna is divided into 3 separate rounds of play. Your ultimate objective is to win more rounds than your opponent, and the player that wins the most rounds wins the game. In each round, players take turns playing units and powers to build the strength of their army. And at the end, the player with the most strength across all their rows wins that round. But how do turns work, and how do we know when the round ends? Let's look at the previous example more closely. On each player's turn, they must either play a card, or instead, they can say pass to signal they're ready to stop playing for the rest of that round. So, once a player has passed, they may not play any more cards until the next round. But, other players can keep taking turns until they also decide to pass. You'll need to think carefully about your position on the field before committing to a pass, or your opponent might still be able to turn the tides of battle. After all players have passed, score the round, discard all cards on the field, and begin the next round. Now that we understand the general flow of the game, let's get set up. There are 3 separate decks of cards shared between all players: the unit deck, the power deck, and the king deck, each with a different colored card backing. At the start of the game, each player draws 9 unit cards, 4 power cards, and 1 king card. After reviewing, players must discard 3 of their cards before play begins for a total of 11 cards in their hand. Unless a card says otherwise, these are the only cards drawn for the entire game, so do not draw cards between rounds. In the first round, the player who dealt the unit deck or won the last game goes first. In later rounds, the previous round's winner goes first. Now that all players have drawn their hands, let's see what the playing field looks like. The playing field is the zone where all players place cards. Each player's side of the playing field is split into 3 rows: melee, range, and siege. Weather and king cards are played to the side of the row they were placed in. The unit, power, and king decks are set to the side of the field, and be sure to give each deck its own graveyard for discarded cards. Sometimes a card might say to set cards aside, which just means to move them off the playing field until the start of the next round when they come back into play. Finally, remember there is no limit to the number of cards that can go in a row, and unit cards may be rearranged within their row at any time for convenience. Now let's take a look at some cards and how they work. Within each deck there are different card types, indicated by the symbol in the upper right corner of a card. The unit deck consists of melee, ranged, and siege cards. Play these units on the field to fight for your army, and start building up your strength. Every unit played will earn you points for the end of the round. The power deck consists of weather, spy, jester, and hex cards, which have unique abilities to help support your army and hinder your opponent on the battlefield. The final deck contains all king cards, which allow you to double the strength of one of your rows and also come with another unique power. King cards do not return to your hand each round, and you only get 1 at the start of the game, so think carefully about when you will need it most. Now that we've seen all of the card types and some examples, let's look at how to understand each card. Here's an example unit card on the left and a power card on the right. We can see the card types in the upper right corner of the cards, which in this example are a ranged unit card and a jester power card. All unit cards will also have a base strength number in the upper right corner, showing how many points they will score at the end of a round. Keep in mind this strength can be changed using the effects of other cards. Also, note that some power cards might also have a base strength, so keep an eye out for them. If the card has an effect, it will be in the main box at the bottom of the card. All power cards will have an effect, but some special unit cards might also have one. Finally, all cards will have a quote at the bottom. Hear what the greatest minds of the past had to say about life, war, and death as you journey through history. Now let's take a closer look at the different types of power cards, and how they can help your army. Note that many of these powers come at a cost to play, so plan carefully. Weather cards multiply or divide the total strength of one of the rows for all players. Be sure to keep weather cards on the field until their effects end at the end of a round. Spy cards allow you to draw more cards, which isn't very common in the game. However, they are played as units on your opponent's side of the field, helping to build up your opponent's strength. Also, at the end of a round, spies go directly into the hand of the player whose side of the field they are on. This allows your opponent to use spies against you in future rounds, so be careful. Jester cards can return cards on the field back to your hand, or set them aside for the next round. Use them to deceive your opponent. Hex cards allow for drawing cards, sending cards to the graveyard, or other useful powers. In total, there are over 40 power cards with unique effects, so try to experiment with new combos whenever you can. Although power cards and kings can help make your unit stronger, you can also build combos between two units using adjacency. So what exactly is adjacency? If two units with the same strength are in the same row, they get an adjacency bonus, which doubles the strength of both units. It is important to remember that adjacency only applies to units with 2 or 3 strength. Also, you cannot add a third unit to an adjacent pair, but you can have multiple pairs on the field or in the same row. Be careful, because adjacency can be created or broken by power cards that change a unit's strength. Now let's go through some examples of adjacency to see it in action. In our first example, a row has 3 units, each with 2 base strength. The 2 units on the left form an adjacent pair and double, but the third unit does not get the bonus. The row's total score is 10. In the next example, a row has 2 units, each with 4 base strength. A certain power card is then played to subtract 1 strength from all units in that row. Both units now have 3 strength, and so now they will receive an adjacency bonus. The row's total score in this example is 12. This is a great example of how making a unit weaker could actually help you make a stronger adjacent pair. Adjacency is a powerful technique to boost the strength of weaker units, so always be on the lookout for how to make these pairs and break up your opponents. Next, let's go through how to score the playing field. It is important to remember that the score keeps updating during the round as cards are played, but only becomes final once all players have passed. In general, units will give you points, and then other cards like powers and kings are used to increase those points or decrease your opponents. Scoring consists of several steps used to find your army's total strength. It is important to do these calculations in the correct order so you get the right score every time. Also keep in mind that you can rearrange any of your units within their row at any time. This won't actually affect the score, but can help you do the scoring calculation. To find the total strength for a unit, first find its base strength in the upper right corner. Next, we need to check if there are any card effects that are modifying our unit's base strength. For example, maybe a power card is attached to the unit. In step 2, apply all modifiers with the keywords set base strength. And then, in step 3, apply all modifiers with the keywords add or subtract base strength. At this point, we need to look for any adjacency bonuses. After finishing step 3 for all units, if there are any units forming adjacent pairs in a row, double that pair's strength. Remember that adjacency is fluid, meaning that at any time you can choose or change which units you're using to make pairs. Finally, check if there are any weather or king cards in the unit's row, and apply their row bonuses that multiply or divide the unit's strength. Be sure to round down if dividing, with a minimum strength of 1 per unit. After performing all of these steps, you should now have your unit's total strength. Adding up the total of all of your unit's strengths gives your total score for the round. Now that we know how to score a round, let's see how to win the game. After players add their unit's total strengths together using the scoring steps, the player with the highest number wins the round. Note that the size of the victory in each round does not matter. Therefore, players should try to win rounds by the smallest amount they can so they don't run out of cards in later rounds. A game of Krieg Eterna is played to the best of 3, so the first player to win 2 rounds wins the game. If you're playing Krieg Eterna with more than 2 players, there are 2 ways to play: free-for-all or team-based. There are a few important points to keep in mind for these types of games. First, players should not show their hands to their teammates, but communication and misdirection is key. Next, each player has their own separate set of rows. So, for example, they do not share rows, adjacency, or kings. Also, teammates can never play on your turn for you, even if you have already passed. Finally, the way scoring works changes from the 2-player version. In a free-for-all, award points based on each player's ranking within each round. After playing all 3 rounds, the player with the most points wins. In a team game, the team with the highest combined total strength wins the round, and play the usual best of 3 format from the 2-player version. Finally, let's go through some helpful tips to keep in mind while you're playing. First, remember that the cards you draw during setup are usually the only cards you'll draw the entire game, so plan to use your resources carefully. Next, remember that the player who won the last round goes first. This is a slight disadvantage for them, so they will have an uphill battle if they want to keep winning. Finally, players may never skip their turn. They must always either play a card or pass the rest of the round. With that, you have all you need to start playing Krieg Eterna. Command your army to attack with precision, deceive enemy officers, and overrun opposing regiments. Good luck on the battlefield.